Good morning, wherever you are and whatever time it is where you are. Thanks for joining us. My name's Pete Lewis and I'm MC for the first of a series of online research meetings focusing on the Queensland Alliance for Agriculture and Food Innovation. I've been fortunate enough to have worked with QRM for almost half its existence, managing special events like these and helping QRM tell some of their great stories. If today's celebration was a Slim Dusty song, it would be looking forward, looking back, where QRM started, where it's been, and I guess more importantly, where it's heading. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Juggera people, the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which we meet today here at St Lucia, and pay my respects to their leaders, past, present, and emerging. And I'd like to acknowledge some other leaders. Professor Deborah Terry, AO, who's the Vice-Chancellor and President of the University of Queensland. Ms. Lauren Stevenson, Director of the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist. Dr. Beth Woods, OAM, Director General of the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Professor Bronwyn Hatch, Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research here at UQ. And Professor Ian Godwin, Acting Director of QRM, and of course to QRM's staff, representatives of government and stakeholders in industry. Now, like any hour at a university, we have a lot to get through, but there will be an opportunity for you to get involved. We'll be taking questions after our panel session. Simply select the Q&A section of the bottom of the Zoom screen and type your question. Obviously, brevity is the soul of wit. We'll pick out the best and we'll try and put as many of them as we can as possible to our guests. But first up, we'd like to hear from Professor Ian Godwin, as I said, Acting Director of QRM. Ian?
Yeah, thanks very much for the introduction, Peter, and welcome everyone. I would actually like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. For those of you who've never actually been to an annual research meeting of QRM before, this one's a little unusual. It may not give you the flavour of what we normally do. Normally it's a wonderful celebration. It's a way of us all to get together because we work at 13 different locations around the state. So even within QRM, it can be difficult to bring people together. This is one of the opportunities in which we're able to do that. It's also really important to make a connection with our DAF partners who are the most important partners with us on this journey, because those of you who will realise it's our 10th anniversary this year, and it's a joint innovation institute between the University of Queensland and DAF. The purpose of this annual research meeting is to showcase and celebrate what we do, but also to encourage further collaboration and connectedness. And that's going to be a little more difficult this year, but we've, as we all know, had a bit of a difficult year in 2020. We've really worked hard at trying to make things work, and we asked some of those really difficult questions like, how many Zooms can you actually do in a single day? What is the best virtual background that shows the colour of my eyes and highlights my hair? And why did the guy next door choose this moment to start up his leaf blower when I'm trying to seal a deal with Iowa? And you would have had similar questions, I'm sure, all through the year. As you all know as well, Robert stepped down after 10 wonderful years as the director of QRM, and this would have been a great way to celebrate Robert's legacy, and we'll continue to find ways to do that when we can get together. I'd also like to point out that we will have a new director sometime soon, and I'm looking at the senior people within the university who I'm sure are going to tell us who our new director is at any moment, because we are waiting with a great amount of bated breath, shall we say. I'd also point out that amongst the research institutes within the University of Queensland, we have one of the most diverse portfolios. Now, I know all of the directors of institutes will say that they're different, and of course they are. But we're one of the few places at the University of Queensland who has large amounts of funding from the ARC, large amounts of funding from the rural R&D corporations. large amounts of funding from ACR, large amounts of funding from philanthropic groups. For example, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is one of our largest funders of external research. And we've got a lot of industry partners as well. And those industry partners include corporate partners and NGO partners within Australia and internationally. So we've got this huge diverse portfolio of research. We're going to be hitting well over $40 million in external research funding this year, which is another wonderful part of the trajectory of the growth of QOFI. And more importantly for us, and also for our DAF partners in the Queensland Government, we continue to score well in the impact front. So because we're outwardly facing and we are ostensibly an applied research institute, we do make a lot of our impacts within agribusiness and in farmers' fields. And that's a wonderful connectedness we have across Australia and internationally through some of our international partnerships as well. To finish off on the Slim Dusty theme that Pete started with, QOFI definitely has been walking a country mile. And for those of you who have walked a country mile, you'll know that many country miles have 5, 6, 7 or more kilometres in them. And we're going to continue to do that for the next 10 years and beyond. But today the celebration is all about hearing from the senior people within the University of Queensland, the senior people within the Queensland Government, and representatives from the government and industry who have been with us on this partnership and will continue to be with us on this partnership. So thanks, Pete.
Ian, thanks so much for that. And as you said, there are a lot of new faces around the university in the back end of 2020, and no more so than our brand spanking new Vice-Chancellor and President of the University, Deb Terry, who's joined us from Curtin University in Western Australia, a state which, of course, many of you will appreciate is still locked to outsiders. So congratulations for escaping, Deborah, and particularly a big welcome to you today, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Peter, and it's great to be here. Before I start, can I also begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which each of us are meeting, and obviously for us in St Lucia, this is the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people, and paying our respects and thanks to their elders past and present. I'd also like to echo Ian's welcome and extend a special welcome to my colleagues from across UQ and QOFI, as well as the many guests who have joined us today from our partners in government, industry and other research organisations. Now, as Peter's just said, I've only just recently returned to UQ, having spent the past 6.5 years in Western Australia. However, I am very familiar with UQ as I worked here for 24 years, from 1990 through to 2014. So as I've been reacquainting myself with the university over the past 2 months, there have been occasions when I felt like I've been walking through a dream. Much of it looks very familiar, campuses, faculties and institutes, but it's changed just enough to feel a little off kilter. And I'm sure that this sensation has been compounded by the pandemic. For instance, it does still feel very odd to be addressing an important research meeting, such as this one, via a video screen from here in my own office. But here we are, and what is so impressive is just how well we are managing. So I'd like first to thank everyone at QOFI for your resilience and your agility in the midst of what has been a very, very challenging year. I've been incredibly impressed by the determination of people at all levels of UQ to keep our students engaged and our research efforts well and truly on track. As I'm sure you're all aware, and we've heard it in the opening comments, this year we're celebrating 10 years since QOFI was originally founded, through the merger of UQ's agricultural research expertise with parts of the research areas of the old Queensland Department of Primary Industries and Fisheries, today known as the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries Queensland. I remember very clearly when QOFI first came into being, but to see the immense size of QOFI today and compare it to those modest beginnings feels a bit like another dream. From an initial team of just 34 researchers, QAFI has grown to over 400 researchers, affiliates, adjuncts, PhD students and professional staff. From an initial budget of $7.7 million in 2010, QAFI is now a research powerhouse that will earn around $46 million in research revenue this year. And according to the latest NTU performance rankings of scientific papers, UQ is ranked as Australia's leading university for agricultural research and among the top 5 universities in the world. This outcome reflects just how much QAFI has achieved over the past 10 years, and my congratulations to you all. However, we don't judge the success of a research institute solely on its size, its rankings, or the number of research papers that it's published. We judge it on its impact. And QAFI's research is certainly having a real-world impact throughout the food supply chain, from the paddock to the plate. In a world with a rapidly expanding population that's projected to reach 10 billion people by 2050, QAFI's researchers are working on projects that will help us to secure a reliable food supply into the future. For QAFI, this is the big picture, addressing global food security. But at an incremental level, there's the QAFI research that's improved the cultivation of crops, helped to protect the health of livestock, and boosted the nutritional value of the food that we eat. And at a more transformational level, QAFI is also developing technologies that represent a step change in agricultural and food production systems. These transformational research projects speak directly to the government's new manufacturing plan, outlined by the Prime Minister just last week, in which opportunities in the food and agriculture sector were highlighted. Also highlighted was the importance of ensuring that our research capabilities are embedded in a vibrant and connected ecosystem that delivers tangible economic and social outcomes, something that QAFI deeply exemplifies. So I'd like to sign off now, but before saying farewell, I do want to pay special tribute to QAFI's founding director, Professor Robert Henry. Robert, of course, has overseen every moment of QAFI's growth since it was established 10 years ago, up until his resignation as QAFI's director just last week. Robert, thank you for the remarkable legacy that you're leaving at QAFI. But I'm delighted that you'll be staying on as Professor of Innovation in Agriculture, and I hope that you do get enormous satisfaction from being able to focus on your research once again. Thank you for the invitation to speak today, and I wish you all the very best for a really productive and insightful research meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Vice-Chancellor, and welcome back to Queensland.
Thank you.
It's now my great pleasure to invite Deputy Vice-Chancellor for Research, Bronwyn Hatch. Take it away, Bronwyn.
Thanks, Peter. So it's Bronwyn Hatch, actually, like
So,
March, but you know,
March.
it's okay. That's okay.
I'll have to go back to school.
That's okay. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be with you. I too want to acknowledge the traditional owners and their custodianship of the lands on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their ancestors and their descendants. I also echo the acknowledgements of both Peter and Professor Terry, but I also wanted to add our QAFI Advisory Board members, as well as the senior industry leaders in the agri-food sector across Australia that are with us as well. It's great to have you all with us. And g'day to all of the QAFI team from all the many sites, our 13 sites that we gather around today as well. So thanks for inviting me to speak at today's QAFI's research meeting. It's a pleasure to join you. I know when I've joined the meetings beforehand, I've had a lot of fun getting to know all of you, as well as getting to hear about what you're up to as well. And this time 12 months ago, we're in the midst of the academic board review into coffee. So it's been a big year, and there has been just a couple of things that have changed since then. But despite the challenges of COVID-19 and the pressing priorities many of you have pivoted onto, I've been heartened by the research activity that coffee has progressed and it has delivered during these COVID times, and the areas of progress that coffee has made towards the recommendation of that review committee as well. Specifically, I wanted to make reference to the recommendation that every aspect of Institute activity should consider and include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's concerns and interests. I understand that efforts to recruit Indigenous researchers, not only in coffee but across the university, are still an ongoing work in progress that I continue to work on with our PVC International Engagement, Professor Bronwyn Fredericks. But I wanted to applaud many of you in coffee who are broadening your engagement with Indigenous partners. A great example of this is the ARC Training Centre for Uniquely Australian Foods, where Professor Yasmina Sultanbawa is working to convert traditional knowledges around selected crops, food and ingredients into branded products. It's reassuring to see the training centre working so closely with their Indigenous governance group as well. In the same vein, many of you, I hope, are aware of the UQ Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research strategy that's currently being developed by the Research and Innovation Portfolio. We hope the strategy will position UQ as a national and international leader in Indigenous research. Feedback from the Coffee Leadership Group, as well as the Coffee Diversity Inclusion Committee, has been inputted into shaping the strategy, and I thank you for that input. The consultation draft of that research strategy will be coming out in the next week, and so I hope you also all engage in providing feedback in our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander research strategy. The other aspect of the review spoke to entrepreneurial opportunities, and I wanted to acknowledge some of the efforts and encourage you all in relation to pursuing entrepreneurial opportunities. It was mentioned before that coffee is renowned for the meaningful partnerships that it has with significant funders, from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the RDCs, ACR, large ag companies, including New Farm, and state and federal governments. Engaging with startups and SMEs, however, are also equally important for pursuing entrepreneurial opportunities, and particularly for the state of Queensland. And I know it's a key component of the RDC's agenda, which I'll mention in a moment. UQ, through coffee and also the partner institute of the Global Change Institute, is positioning UQ as a lead university for one opportunity that is an emerging agri-food innovation hub that's being developed out of the Toowoomba region. So the consortium is known as Agri-Food Connect, and is focusing on 5 areas of impact. And it's involving federal and state government, corporates, venture capitalists, other universities, startups and SMEs. Doing research and innovation in an ecosystem is complex, and that's the kind of happy hunting ground that coffee is certainly well positioned to lead. The research impact areas are focused on large-scale projects, education and training, innovation services, facility networks that will link from Toowoomba back through Gatton to St Lucia, and also having collaborative events. One of the projects that's already being worked up is provenance tracking that relates to livestock value chains. So think about blockchain, for example. And there are other opportunities being pursued in digital agriculture and protected cropping as well. And speaking of those other entrepreneurial opportunities, you may have already seen the Rural Development Corporations, the RDCs, together establish and announce through the Minister for Agriculture, the Agricultural Innovation Australia Limited, AIA. And AIA is aimed at making it easier for investors to navigate and partner with the Australian Ag Innovation System. It's focused on an agile investment framework that will attract contributions from a range of sources, enabling large-scale investment on issues of national importance to fast-track action along our agricultural and food value chains, and importantly, receive our research-trained graduates as new jobs are created and filled. So having an impact is also the reason that so many of us entered careers into research. And the reinvigorated Global Change Institute is but one example of where we are creating opportunities to have an impact by solving global challenges. GCI has the goals to support areas like coffee connect more extensively, noting that you do connect now, but our aspiration is to have you leading and contributing more with other disciplines across UQ to position for major research investments with industries. So I'd just like to share my screen now, just to remind folks of the research. That's the wrong one. Just to remind you of the Global Change Institute and its research impact framework. So these themes will be familiar to many of you, but no doubt you'll be able to relate to more than one of these particular impact themes. So the natural one, where coffee's greatest renown is related to the Building Better Bioeconomies area, where we're building more environmentally sustainable, economically viable and community supported biological production systems. In designing technology for tomorrow, I've highlighted areas there and resource revolutions, think circular bioeconomies, and designing human technology cooperation of the future as well. And another area on the far right-hand side, particularly for the Centre for Food and Nutrition, is leading healthy lives. I'm looking at how to enhance the nutritional properties of food to help holistic health approaches. So the next thing I wanted to just share with you in finishing off is about the Global Change Research Networks, which have been launched last week. They're expressions of interest, which close on Thursday. I haven't got the date there, but I missed that. I'll send it around to everyone. It's towards the end of November. Global Change Research Networks. These are intended to resource the development of major funding bids that engage disciplines from across UQ. Rather than the development of individual linkage or discovery, it's about larger scale efforts. ARC industry transformation research programs, the Medical Research Future Fund Frontier Research Programs, the NHMRC, Centres of Research Excellence, CRCs, maybe even AIA bids, that collective innovation story for the RDCs, and also positioned for major funding from philanthropic sources as well. So the initial funding for those are $50,000 for 12 months, and I'd really encourage Coffee to consider leading or contributing to the development of those research networks. So as Debbie mentioned, from about 37 people working on one site 10 years ago, today Coffee is a team of more than 400 people across 13 sites. Collectively, your team brings in 9% of UQ's research income, and you can be immensely proud of that achievement. But Robert tells me it's just a beginning. So Coffee is truly a centre that has achieved great things, and I also, in front of all of the Coffee community, wanted to recognise the effort of Professor Robert Henry, who stepped down on September 30th. He'll now focus on a rather very rich and full dance card on his personal research activities. And many thanks to the Coffee Centre directors who will act as the director until the new director arrives, and Ian Godwin's starting off for us in that role. Thank you, Ian. Now, interviews for the Coffee director position were conducted on the 24th of September, and I hope to be in a position to share an update on the outcome of the process for you very soon. I suspect it will be mid-October. I certainly acknowledge that waiting can cause uncertainty for Coffee and its staff, as Ian mentioned, but rest assured that the panel and I are doing our due diligence on behalf of the university to ensure the next director is well positioned to take Coffee forward into the next decade. So you'll get a note update from me, or I might do a video to let you know who the successful candidate is. So we've seen throughout the pandemic, our ag and food focused industries are essential to the nation, and as the economy rebuilds, there's never been a more important time to accelerate sustainable growth across the agri-food sector. And I'm sure the budget tonight will highlight even more for us as a research provider. I congratulate everyone at QFI for your first 10 years. There's a lot of people of renown throughout the community that have been through QFI. And like me, I'm sure you're looking forward to the celebrations in December. I'm committed to supporting QFI and its research excellence and the research impact aspirations it has. And I ask that you proactively engage in making Queensland a global hub for agri-food research and innovation. Thanks, Peter.
Professor Bronwyn Harch, everybody. And Bronwyn, sing out if you need somebody to introduce that series of videos you're planning. I've got your name right now. It's my great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Beth Woods. Beth is the Beth Woods OAM. Beth is the Director General for the Queensland Department of Agriculture and Fisheries. Please welcome Dr. Beth Woods.
Thanks, Pete. It's a great pleasure to be here today with a set of people who I've worked with over many years. Like other speakers this morning, I want to start though by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting, wherever that happens to be, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. From a personal perspective, a really important part of my role is to be government champion for the Northern Peninsula area, and it really has been one of the most rewarding experiences in a personal sense to come to understand more about a particular community within Queensland, their traditions, their culture and their aspirations. I want to acknowledge our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Debbie Terry, somebody who I've worked with over many years, Lauren Stevenson, who's going to speak after me, Bronwyn Harch, Ian Godwin, and also the panellists who'll be part of the program later. I feel like it's a bit of a reunion of people who I have been working with for many years. Like Ian, I always look forward to these meetings. In recent years, I haven't got to spend the entire time at the meeting, but they're a wonderful opportunity to be excited by things that are happening at the forefront of research for agriculture and to renew old friendships and find new, young, inspiring colleagues. This particular research meeting is unique for 3 reasons. It is the 10th anniversary of QFI. We are delivering in the middle of a pandemic, quite a unique experience, and we're also acknowledging Robert's contribution. I think I might be the only member of the selection panel that's still around. And I remember the discussion about how long the first inaugural director of QFI might stay with the Institute and how important it was that we found somebody who would be there for at least 5 years to set what at that time was really quite a innovative and high risk institute on a path to future success. It's a great tribute to Robert that he stayed and that he's built an institute that is genuinely on the map internationally for its expertise in subtropical and tropical agriculture. And from a state perspective, that it's an institute that every Minister of Primary Industries or Agriculture in the last 10 years has come to know and love. I have to say that wasn't the situation at the time that QFI was first conceived. And in fact, we had an ongoing challenge within government to encourage ministers to think about what the university role was and could be. And I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to reflect on why QFI came into existence, because I know many people have joined since that day. At the time that we started the discussion about QFI, the department, my department, had almost 20 part-time or joint appointments with UQ. They were higgledy-piggledy, they were conceived at various points in time They were partly defensive from a departmental perspective because we were losing some of our best people to the university, and they were partly offensive because the university was losing its capacity to teach and its recognition as a university with excellence in agriculture and related fields. We were operating as competitors in seeking research funding, and I was acutely conscious that that was a very unhelpful way to be positioned. Australia is actually a small agricultural trading nation. The competition is offshore, and we needed to be effectively combining resources to ensure that our industries were well positioned to go forward. So the conversation began. Bronwyn's predecessor, Max Liu, was the partner in the conversation from UQ, and I want to acknowledge his contribution because he was totally up for what, as I said, at that stage was quite an innovative proposal that we would do what's called in industrial relations a transfer of business, that we would transfer some of our leading researchers who were likely to prosper in the university setting with their existing projects and with the support, we hoped, of their funding partners across to UQ. We had wonderful support from the RDCs and various other funders, and that's exactly what has subsequently happened. And we also were able to maintain many of those researchers in their regional locations. And we therefore have an institute that is highly relevant to Queensland, very much engaged in the for which the research will have implications, and very much part of what I hope is an increasingly vigorous innovation ecosystem for agriculture and related industries. By 2022, I'm told that QRM is likely to have generated over $500 million of research income, which is a fantastic tribute to the hard work of the original group of founding scientists and all of those who've come on board to be part of the over the subsequent years. I'm sure you'd all agree that 2020 has been a year like no other. But for Queensland, I think it's worthwhile just reminding you all that growth in agriculture remains about export. We are a very well-fed nation, and while there are always new market niches to be explored, growth in a major sense really depends on our export success. Agriculture trade has by and large continued unhindered by the COVID-19 pandemic. But when I say unhindered, I mean we've been able to succeed while players have demonstrated fantastic agility. However, some sectors, particularly those who have a focus on high-end product and on delivery through the food service sector, have noticed significant constraints in their market. And I think it's fair to say that we still have to wait to see what the 12-month, 2-year, 5-year and 10-year impacts of COVID will be on the shape of markets for Australian agricultural and food products. We've also seen some unexpected challenges in terms of a very rapidly shrinking pool of labour available for the agricultural sector, both on farm and in the processing sector. That's a real challenge and one that is going to accelerate a direction that I think we have all expected. Australian agriculture's always been ahead of the curve in terms of automation, but we are really going to see an acceleration into the power of digital approaches within the sector and the application of AI, robotics, sensor technology, all those fantastic areas of innovation that were part of the reason for the development of QRM in the first instance. And that was the recognition that it wasn't just agricultural science that was going to underpin the future of the sector, but the contribution of many academic fields. So we're looking at that. We're looking at how to deal with the continuing challenge of climate change. And we're also looking at the question of food supply. It's an urgent question in parts of the world where food supply has been more disrupted than it has been in Australia. And it's an enduring question because the mouths that are going to require feeding as we head towards 2050 are largely already born, or their parents are certainly around. So we know that the world will need considerably more food in that time frame, and that we will be part of the challenge of meeting product demand for a whole range of different markets and different demands in the period between now and 2050. So I think the impacts of COVID are really just one of the many disruptions that we can expect while we deal with those enduring challenges of climate change and increasing food demand. In this turbulent time, research needs to be relevant, practical, timely, and matched to the opportunity to be able to be implemented, as well as visionary and drawing on all of the technical capabilities that we have at our fingertips. I really want to compliment QOFI on already bringing together many strands of innovation and research. And I think that research alliances like this one, and like the new one that's been announced by the RDCs in the last few days, will be part of our new landscape as we head into the next decade. From a departmental perspective and a government perspective, moving out of the way as a part owner of a whole range of joint appointees and becoming an investor partner with the University of Queensland has proved to be a really productive partnership, and I look forward to that being continued. But in particular, I'm, in my current role, interested in what's that going to contribute for the people of Queensland, the businesses of Queensland, the community of Queensland, and the economy of Queensland. As we look forward for the next 10 years, both UQ and DAF in our particular governance structures have been involved in review processes in the last 12 months. Bronwyn spoke briefly about the UQ review, and I want to just make a very short comment about the departmental review. Again, it is a very positive review that talks about the wonderful achievements that QOFI has, the growth trajectory it's on, and the potential it has going forward. But we have been reminded about the need for focus and the need to make sure that we continue to develop really effective partnership models and communication models that work with our university partners, with government, and with industry to ensure that we are contributing to the problems on the ground. Finally, I'd just like to make a couple of closing remarks. I commented on the fact that I think I'm the only one of the selection panel that appointed Robert Still around. I want to acknowledge very sincerely Robert's contribution. He really has been a tireless leader on behalf of QOFI and a tireless contributor to a whole range of government activities where we've asked him to come and present a very particular perspective from a leading position in innovation for the sector. I know that he's going to remain very actively involved. It wouldn't be possible for him to be anything other than that. So I wish him well with all of his future roles. Although he's stepping down, I'm very confident that with Debbie coming back into the leadership role at UQ and with her strong presence as part of the UQ leadership team at the time when QOFI was established, and her personal commitment to excellence in research that the leadership of UQ will be well positioned to take coffee forward. And I have very much appreciated Bronwyn's absolutely boots and all approach to looking for future opportunities for coffee and future opportunities for collaboration and partnership. But finally, I want to really pay tribute to those founding members of the coffee team and to all the individuals who have come on board over the last 10 years. This is very much a team game. It's not a game about individual achievement that we're celebrating today, as much as it's a game about how a team comes together and how people lean into problems to contribute their particular expertise and to take us into new areas and new opportunities. I think coffee has really demonstrated how that can be done, and I wish all of you individually and collectively well as you continue to contribute. Certainly, I'm looking forward to seeing what that means for the agriculture, the food, the fisheries, and the forestry businesses of Queensland over the next 10 years and beyond, because that's really the lifetime that we talk about in research. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Pete. Back to you.
Appreciate that, Beth. As you mentioned, part of the secret for coffee success initially was getting the ear of government. Some of our viewers this morning mightn't be aware, but the great state of Queensland is embarking into a state election campaign where I'm told all the politicians are all ears. So there you go. It's now our great pleasure to invite our special guest speaker this morning, Lauren Stevenson. Lauren is the Director of the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist, and that's responsible for leading scientific strategy for the state, as well as promoting science and engaging Queenslanders in science through the study of STEM subjects and other things. Please welcome Lauren Stevenson.
Thank you, Peter. May I also acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to leaders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge Professor Deborah Terry AO, Vice-Chancellor and President of UQ, Professor Bronwyn Hart, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Research, UQ, Dr. Beth Woods, OAM, Director General, Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, Professor Ian Godwin, Acting Director, Coffee staff, today's panelists, representatives from government and industry. I'll just share my screen here. Today's important for a number of reasons, not the least being to celebrate the 10th anniversary of coffee, to acknowledge, as Beth Woods pointed out, that we're meeting in an unprecedented time brought about by COVID, to acknowledge Rob Henry's excellent leadership, which has seen coffee in such a strong place today. It's also the day that the federal budget's going to be handed down and the day that caretaker period commences in Queensland ahead of the state election. Leaving all that aside though, I've been asked to address you on what is the Queensland perspective on future business of science and what's the relationship between that and achieving equity and diversity in STEM. My slide is doing something and not moving on.
Yes, it's yeah. We're seeing you, but we're not seeing your slides. Here we go.
Ah, you got the slide now?
I think we're cooking with gas. Go ahead.
Thank you. What it's not doing is moving on to the next slide, which I know we practiced this before. Okay, now it's working. You can tell I'm more used to using Teams than Zoom. Given that this coffee research meeting is celebrating the last 10 years since the formation of coffee and is looking toward the next 10, I thought I would also commence with an overview of what science and research funding and strategies have achieved to date and upon which we can build for the future. I've gone back further than 10 years. I've actually started with the Smart State strategies, which commenced more than 20 years ago and led into other strategies, culminating most recently with Advance Queensland. These two, Smart State and Advance Queensland, have been pivotal for state funding of science, research and innovation. This diagram illustrates the funding through the financial years 2001-2 to 2019-20. The peaks in the smart state funding relate to major infrastructure commitments. The small funding that we administer in our office for engaging science grants, citizen science grants, and numerous other engagement activities is included in the AQ4 column and also the 1920 column. From 1998 to 2012, under the Smart State strategies, the Queensland Government invested $4.9 billion into science, research and development, innovation and education across a range of departments. Of this $4.9 billion, the responsible departments invested $1.28 billion towards science and research through infrastructure, operational funding, projects and collaborations, and skills, primarily fellowships and scholarships. This investment leveraged approximately $2.7 billion from external sources, resulting in a leverage to funding ratio of at least 2 to 1. This funding achieved 45 research infrastructure projects, 248 collaborative research projects, and 318 fellowships, Smithsonian Fellows, PhD scholarships, internships. Interesting to note that 71% of that total funding was invested in Brisbane-based universities, with 14% directed at regionally based universities. The balance supported non-university recipients, for example, independent medical research organisations or state or Commonwealth agencies. Over those years of the Smart State strategies, the Queensland Government remained committed to using science and innovation for economic success by ensuring the government had access to the best possible scientific advice. And this was directed towards meeting the future policy challenges of Queensland industries and contributing to sound decision-making about environmental, economic, industry, social issues. As I mentioned before, there was considerable investment in infrastructure, and this resulted in, for example, the construction of the Translational Research Institute, the Eco Sciences Precinct at Dutton Park, the Health and Food Sciences Precinct at Coopers Plains, and amongst many. Other facilities received operational funding to support their establishment, and this included at UQ, for example, the Institute for Molecular Bioscience and the Queensland Brain Institute. The investment in infrastructure was followed by significant investment in people through funding, fellowships, scholarships, and collaborative research projects. The strategic investments in science capability over that period have left an enduring legacy. Funding provided to science, technology, and innovation has significantly impacted upon Queensland's competitiveness in terms of its global reputation for science excellence and its research capability. Further funding was provided in the years 2012 to 2015, including, for example, for the establishment of the Clem Jones Centre for Ageing Dementia Research at QBI and the establishment of the AITHM, the Australian Institute of Tropical Health and Medicine, based at the 2 JCU campuses of Townsville and Cairns. Over the last 5 years, under Advance Queensland, we've seen quite a number of projects grow, which were commenced earlier in Smart State or similar projects, but also a new direction. Advance Queensland started with a $180 million package, which grew to over $755 million. The change was a stronger innovation component, with the initiative targeted at driving economic growth and creating jobs across all Queensland regions. In 2014, the government commissioned Professor Josh Lerner, head of the Entrepreneurial Management Unit at Harvard Business School, to research how Queensland could get maximum benefit from investing in innovation. The Advanced Queensland Initiative was designed on Professor Lohner's recommendations with the goal of using global best practice to build Queensland's innovation economy. In this time, we've seen thousands of innovators and projects supported, 20,000 jobs created across the state. The lead agency has worked with 9 other Queensland government departments to implement the strategy, and that includes our department and our office, through which all of our engagement programs were funded. In addition, from 2004 to 2013, the Queensland Government provided funding support of 55.7 million, which enabled the leverage of a further 191.5 million through NCRIS funding, the National Collaborative Research Infrastructure Strategy. It also allowed leverage from industry. The outcomes of this support have included measurable increases in research reputation, industry engagement, and have increased R&D jobs, or contributed at least to the increase in R&D jobs. This funding support for infrastructure has been continued by our Department of Environment and Science with the implementation of the Research Infrastructure Co-Investment Fund to provide support for research institutions seeking matching funding to take up the opportunity for NCRIS funding. This Research Infrastructure Co-Investment Fund is aimed at attracting critical co-investment from NCRIS for NCRIS facilities planned or existing in Queensland. The Queensland Government invited applications for this co-investment in the priority areas mapped in the 2016 National Research Infrastructure Roadmap. These included areas such as digital data and e-research platforms, platforms for humanities, arts, social sciences, characterization, advanced fabrication and manufacturing, advanced physics and astronomy, earth and environmental systems, biosecurity, complex biology, and therapeutic development. The fund also aimed to support job creation, both directly and indirectly, as previous government support had done, and to support high-impact industry-relevant research with economic, social, and environmental impact. While the current funding round is now closed, there were many benefits to Queensland that were envisaged in the design of the program through delivery of projects that addressed at least one of those co-investment areas that I just ran through, and that benefited Queensland through alignment with the Advanced Queensland Industry Roadmaps, for example. Projects that proposed the acquisition of capital equipment and major systems or key expertise and personnel to lift the competitiveness of existing or planned NCRIS capabilities. Those that had their headquarters or a research presence located or planned to be located in Queensland. And there are further benefits listed on the slide. To date, there's been quite a few projects, 8 of them here, as you can see, which have received funding. 2 major recipients were the Australian National Fabrication Facility and Bioplatforms Australia, but additional facilities were awarded funding under this program as listed here, including QCIF, TERN, IMOS, the National Imaging Facility, Compounds Australia, Microscopy Australia, so a wide spread. So where to from here? We've got all this strategic investment of the past that have provided a solid foundation. Where do we look next for the business of science? The new SMARTS report, commissioned by the Department of Environment and Science and developed by Data 61, outlined 8 knowledge-intensive industry sectors, and you'll see that advanced agriculture is one of these. These 8 emerging knowledge-intensive industries could provide significant social, environmental, and economic benefits for Queensland. They fall at the intersection of multiple supply and demand trends and drivers. Here, a change in supply presents opportunities to offer new products or services or provide existing ones more efficiently, and a change in demand can create new markets and customers. The new SMARTS report acknowledges the role that knowledge clusters play in fostering and growing the development of emerging industries. And it lists some clusters to exemplify this notion. Many you will be familiar with. Silicon Valley in California, Silicon Fen in Cambridge, where Fen stands for phenomenon, which has founded more than 5,000 firms since inception and accounts for more than 29% of all employment in Cambridge. Silicon Wadi in Israel, and now also perhaps Silicon Sunshine, Queensland based at the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Centre. This 10 to 15-year project has created an impressive number of jobs and is anticipated to add something like 1.4 billion to the Queensland economy once complete. So physical proximity is a key. Such clusters build on the co-location of universities and other research institutions, along with industry, innovation precincts and manufacturing hubs. The Data 61 report identifies advanced agriculture as a knowledge-intensive industry with key components. It's made up of knowledge-rich food and agricultural businesses, offering high-quality products and services that are sustainable, secure, and nutritious. The report also acknowledges the depth of food science expertise in Queensland, which could help the sector become more climate resilient and knowledge intensive. And one key area for growth would appear to be that of synthetic biology. Under the former interim Queensland Chief Scientist, Professor Paul Birch, our office undertook consultation and mapped all the research precincts, innovation precincts, manufacturing hubs around the state to identify 7 emerging industry areas based on those 8 that Data 61 had delineated. And the 7 that we chose align with Queensland's strategic science and innovation capability. Some of you might have been involved in those discussions. So the 7 are listed there on the left: advanced food and agriculture, advanced manufacturing, next-gen aerospace, biomedical, personalised and preventative healthcare, smart mining, sustainable energy, sustainable natural and managed ecosystems. Once again, and not surprisingly, advanced food and agriculture is identified as a key emerging knowledge-intensive industry. And this is clearly demonstrated by the facts listed on the right side of the slide. 26% of ag startups are in Queensland, that's Australian ones. Queensland boasts deep food science expertise. There is a demand for functional foods, non-animal protein, high-value nutrition, safe food with provenance, traditional knowledge. And our biosecurity actions and regulations preserve the state's clean and green image. Lending weight to the identification of advanced food and agriculture, Tubb and Sieber, writing on Rethinking Food and Agriculture, state, "We are on the cusp of the deepest, fastest, most consequential disruption in food and agricultural production since the first domestication of plants and animals. The cost of proteins will be 5 times cheaper by 2030 and 10 times cheaper by 2035 than existing animal proteins. They will be superior in every key attribute, more nutritious, healthier, better tasting, more convenient, and with almost unimaginable variety." So responding to this idea, and in collaboration with other government departments, including Trade and Investment Queensland and State Development, our office and colleagues in science and technology undertook some further consultation which confirmed these 7 emerging industries. However, during the course of those discussions and a large forum that we ran pre-COVID, it became apparent that there was a need to describe how Queensland science connects and aligns in each of these industry sectors. Where are the experts? Where's the alignment with, for example, innovation hubs, advanced manufacturing centres, research centres, in order that we could demonstrate how our capabilities supports emerging industries so that we can promote our value proposition internationally and to help understand how we should position both our research and investments for the future. It became apparent we needed a mechanism to link the dots on a map for an audience which potentially could include national or international investors that the state or research or industry was seeking to attract to Queensland, or to attract research and innovator talent, or just increasing opportunities for better business and research connections within the state. We're working with colleagues across our department on a data visualization tool based on the existing Science Capability Directory to develop an online interactive graph for each sector. This will help create awareness of our science and innovation capabilities underpinning these key emerging knowledge-intensive industries. It will highlight the connections between the Queensland Government's support for local science, industry, innovation, including the 10-year industry roadmaps, new centres or hubs established across the state, encourage new collaboration and investment by providing information and access points, and support existing endeavours to profile Queensland science, building on the work already undertaken to establish the Queensland Science Capability Directory. So if I can get this to work, I made a short 30-second video of how this will work. To explore a theme, you click on a dot in that inner circle, and from there you navigate to the outer circle, which gives you details of the research institutes, centres, hubs, precincts, and how they're all connected. If you want more information on a particular research location, if you click on that outer circle, you will then go to the Queensland Science Capability Directory, and there a link out to the institution itself. Of course, you could start the other way around. We could start with an institution on that outer circle and see, well, you know, where are the links? What are the key themes? And from there, you could find other partners. We also have a video highlighting all of this work and demonstrating some of the key people involved. And I may be able to make that available at a future time. So now I've given you a quick run through of strategic investment that's been made in the past, providing the foundations for the future. We've had a quick look at some of the strengths where our clusters exist for the future work, but we've not yet reached a position of equity and diversity in STEM to drive our future. And so I wonder if we could turn our thoughts to that. Of critical importance to our young people is how do we get them involved in STEM? How do we get them staying engaged at school, going on to university, and potentially then onto a career? One of the most important things is to have role models, mentors, and an environment which encourages and inspires them to consider taking up a career in any of the STEM fields. Women represent just 16% of Australians with STEM qualifications, and research shows that unconscious bias and stereotypes can influence us from as young as 9 years old. The Australian Chief Scientist, Alan Finkel, has found that women in STEM are still far short of workplace equity. COVID-19 risks undoing even the modest gains of recent years. The events of 2020 are reshaping the way we all live, work, teach, and learn. I mean, we're all sitting behind computers today, for example, instead of meeting personally together. And while we've all been affected differently, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on women has been particularly significant. A recent report by the Rapid Research Information Forum, which includes all chief scientists among its membership, found the pandemic has left women facing disproportionate increases in caring responsibilities and disruptions to their working hours and job security. The hard-won gains made by women in STEM are at risk, especially if employers of people with STEM skills do not closely monitor and mitigate the gendered impact of their decisions. As the figures you see on the screen in front of you are based on data from 2016, well before COVID impacted us, we have to ask, why are there so few women? Half our population's female, after all. And STEM jobs are growing 1.9 times faster than other jobs, yet enrolments in STEM degrees and courses are growing much more slowly or even declining for women and minorities. The Australian Chief Scientist found that people with STEM qualifications work in a wide range of occupations and industries, and on average, they earned more than those with non-STEM qualifications, and that the income levels increased with qualification level. Those are all good findings. However, Alan Finkel's office noted the pace of change towards a fairer and more diverse STEM labour force is still slow. In 2006, 27% of STEM university graduates in the labour force were women. A whole decade later, this had only risen 2% to 29%. What can we do? It can be difficult to work to counteract unconscious bias, and often training and information sessions are aimed at management levels, whereas this is throughout and in all levels. We can all influence the world around us. What we can also influence is providing role models and mentors, which is a critically important step to attract young people to STEM study and STEM careers. After all, you can't be what you can't see. It was pleasing to see the women in agricultural research featured on the QRM website, may I just say. So what are some practical steps we can all take to improve these statistics and see more women in the sector? The information on this slide is from an article on improving gender equity in coastal geoscience and engineering by Ana Villaconcejo, but it applies equally well to other STEM fields. Ana is at the University of Sydney. Aspects of these actions are also echoed in the Federal Advancing Women in STEM strategy and 2020 action plan, and also the Women in STEM decadal plan. I just like the way Anna set this out and thought we might run through it quickly. We should all advocate for more women in prestige roles. These are the women who inspire others to follow them, and they can be a voice of influence to encourage organisational buy-in of leadership and mentoring for women. Such actions boost the self-belief of women's leadership skills, and in turn, this increases the number of women seeking out leadership roles. Women like Dr. Kathy Foley, Chief Scientist for CSIRO, are leading the way. And now in Queensland, we have 6 universities with women as Vice-Chancellors. There are also programs like Athena Swan or the SAGE initiative, Science in Australia Gender Equity, which support structural and cultural change. Promote high-achieving females. Once again, this inspires other women. It provides an example to follow, both to employers and for other women to aspire to. There is evidence that challenges specific to women continue to be a wage gap. Women still earn only 73% of what men do, I'm speaking generally here, for the same job over their working life, due to the disruptions to their working life and often the lack of a clear path to promotion. Discrimination, unfortunately, remains present in many workplaces. Sexual harassment is unfortunately not a thing of the past. The higher up you're promoted, the fewer women there are. These findings were supported by research from the Male Champions of Change STEM group, which found women in STEM jobs experience significantly more barriers than men, including sexism, workplace culture, exclusion, and once again, a lack of career progression. So having heard all that, can we all create awareness of gender bias? While there is definitely improvements here, women are still not visibly represented in STEM. Some examples that I took from the Women in STEM decadal plan include that women are quoted as sources in only 26% of science and technology related news stories. I hope we see a change there. Only 21 women have won a Nobel Prize for Science. That's just 3% of the total Science Prize winners. In 2018, only 1 woman received one of the Australian Prime Minister's prizes for science out of 7 available prizes, and only 1 individual woman has ever received the main Prime Minister's Prize for Science. Speak up on behalf of women, but also on your own behalf if you're a woman. One example cited by Ana Villaconcejo was to speak up if you observe or are the subject of incidents such as being overlooked or ignored in favour of male colleagues. One respondent in Anna's research noted, getting my first grant and employing a male postdoc, our project partners treated him as the lead. Perhaps some of you have experienced this sort of thing. Speak up. Get better support for return to work. Ask women what is needed to help them return to work after any break, such as responsibilities for children or aged parents or returning from further study. This is particularly relevant right now when COVID has put more of the familiar responsibilities onto the shoulders of women, as I mentioned before. Alan Finkel's report found that STEM qualified women also do more hours of unpaid domestic work than STEM qualified men. Women working full-time were more than twice as likely as men, 19% versus 8% respectively, to do more than 15 hours domestic work a week. We can help with flexible work arrangements, including working part-time, working from home. These are crucial tools to keeping parents, male and female, in the labour force. And other initiatives such as childcare subsidies, incentives for fathers to take significant parental and carers leave have proven effective in supporting equitable outcomes in the workforce. Redefine success, but also in the STEM fields, redefine what is a STEM professional, what is a scientist. This is where more role models are particularly important. And encourage more women to enter the discipline at a young age. And that is something both our office and the Department of Education are actively involved in. Let me tell you what we are doing. Alongside our partners, the Office for Women, the Queensland Museum, and the BHP Billiton Foundation, we host the Queensland Women in STEM Prize and have done so annually since 2016. The photo at the top shows our new Chief Scientist, Professor Hugh Possingham, with this year's finalists at the Queensland Women in STEM Prize, which was held Sunday a week ago. The three categories for the prize are a jury award determined by a judging panel, an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander jury award determined once again by a panel, and a People's Choice Award determined by public vote. We also support the Young Tall Poppy Awards. This is a national award, and we host the Queensland Awards in partnership with the Australian Institute for Policy and Science. The lower photo is from this year's awards, held in August, and features 9 of the 10 finalists. The overall winner, Dr. Celine Freer, is at the back left in the white shirt. These outstanding achievers from the Women in STEM Prize and Young Tall Poppies go on to become role models to encourage younger Australians to follow in their footsteps. We work with them to encourage them into other programs, such as our Meet a Scientist in School program held in National Science Week. I have to note while talking about the Young Tall Poppy Award that this is open, of course, to men and women, and usually we have equal numbers. This year, women far outnumbered the men, as you could see from the photo. 7 women and 3 men were finalists in the Young Tall Poppies. So maybe that's an indication of something. Are we doing something right or whatever? Not right. We also invite all these high achievers to join our Flying Scientists cohort to visit rural and remote schools throughout the year, except for this year, of course, although our Flying Scientists did manage to get to some schools before COVID really took off, and they were also in live chat sessions with schools and featured in videos. We actually managed to run 6 events and produce 6 videos, which achieved 745 views, and we had 11 scientists involved. Another of our key partners is the Department of Education, and we support the STEM Girl Power Camp, which has seen hundreds of students come to Brisbane for the week-long camp each March to coincide with World Science Festival. Let me finish with women in agriculture. For this sector, campaigns like the Visible Farmer Project and also the Invisible Farmer Project put a spotlight on gender, food security in the Australian agriculture sector. There are those who believe that gender equity can be improved rapidly. And I was pleased to note that ACER CEO, Professor Andrew Campbell, was one of those. Andrew said, better gender balance at all levels within his organisation, ACER, demonstrates that gender equity is not only possible, but achievable. Let's all keep working towards that goal. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Lauren. Look, frankly, if you're looking for inspirations for equity and diversity in STEM subjects or research and development more generally, you could not have done better than those women that we have heard from in the opening hour of this meeting. Deborah, Bronwyn, Beth and Lauren are leaders in their fields and role models for just how far energy and enthusiasm can get you. So once again, thanks Lauren for that presentation.